Right then, let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 48 of the 2-on-1 Powerchair football podcast powered by MK Battery. A huge thank you to MK Battery, not just for supporting this podcast, but for backing every single WFA National League live stream for 25-26. The streams, the commentary, the graphics, the insights, the production, all of that is made possible because of their support. So thank you for helping us showcase the sport the way it deserves to be seen. Today, we're focusing on the Slater and Gordon Premiership and recapping the action from Gameweek 3. My name is Ryan Sipple, and I'm once again joined by my now co-host, Gregg Baxter. Gregg, great to have you back on. How are you?
That's great to be co-host. I love the title. Thank you very much. Yeah, delighted to be back officially, if you want to call it that now, after a lovely weekend of Premiership action where we saw loads of good Powerchair football, as always, and twists and turns in title races, in relegation battles. It just is what it is now, and it delivers every single weekend. Excitement, some nerves around the arena at some points during games, drama, controversy. The sport is just delivering every year, and every year we find ourselves saying, this is the most exciting year we've ever had. This is the best year we've had, and we get back 12 months after that and go, oh, look, this is the best year now. The sport just continues to go from strength to strength, and long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And now we've passed the midway point, so we're into the business end of the season, not just in the Premiership, but Championship as well. There was a few key stats that came my way from Gameweek 3. Did you know it's the first time ever we've finished a Premiership weekend with a top three that doesn't include any of Aspire, Northern Thunder, or West Bromwich Albion? There's a real shift in the division, no?
Oh, massively. But credit to Aspire, they're still hanging on. They're well in that title race. So and West Brom will play a part as well in that. They'll have a say. They won't want to go quietly into the night in a mid-table, sort of mediocrity. So it just does go to show the landscape of Powerchair football in this country is changing from the historic sort of trio or duos it now is. But it's just exciting, is what it is. It's great for the sport. It's brilliant for the drama that we've got so many teams capable of taking points off each other. That there are no real easy games.
No, Leeds moved to the top spot for the first time this season. Greenbank continue to build some incredible momentum. Teesside delivered a faultless weekend without making too much noise, with attention potentially elsewhere, and Aspire remain unbeaten, even if it didn't feel completely dominant. Four sides separated by a single point. Goal difference likely to play a significant factor come season's end. If that wasn't enough to explain the intensity of the division, there were 14 yellow cards across the weekend, equaling the National League record, which tells you everything you need to know about how competitive things are right now. Before we dive in, two quick shout outs. Firstly, Jeff Lewis. Jeff does an incredible job leading and coordinating our referees, helping maintain the officiating standards that we know are world leading. The consistency, the professionalism, the structure that does not happen by accident. But alongside that, Jeff is also the reason we're able to bring so many of the stats, the milestones, historical bits of context to these episodes, to the podcast. And whether it's the records, the comparisons, the first time ever moments, they're all because he's tracked them properly and preserved the history of the sport with unbelievable attention to detail. So as I referenced, little statistical nuggets and historical markers across this episode, just know that all of that has been done by Jeff. I take absolutely no credit whatsoever. And secondly, a huge shout out to Alex Dowden. One of the main reasons the league runs as smoothly as it does is because of him. He is one of the most tireless people I've ever worked with. He's the unsung hero of every National League weekend, and in truth, most WFA events full stop. He's currently serving as the interim chair of the National League Management Committee, so he's also dealing with every issue that arises around the competition, and there are always issues, but he handles them professionally, calmly, appropriately every single time. Then you add in the streaming infrastructure, the behind-the-scenes coordination, the troubleshooting that nobody sees, but everyone benefits from. So a huge amount of what people enjoy on a match weekend is down to Alex. He won't thank me for saying it, but he is incredible. Right then, as always with these recaps, we'll go through team by team from 12th in the division, working up to first, referencing results, performances, standout players. We'll also weave in the Swizzles Award winners along the way. Gregg and I will no doubt have the Scoreline app alongside us, so we encourage our listeners to do that as well. Let's get started. In 12th place, it's Muscle Warriors, and Gameweek 3 was another stark reminder of how unforgiving the Premiership can be. They played 4 fixtures across the weekend, came away with no points. It was a 4-0 defeat to Greenbank, a 9-0 loss to Teesside, a 3-0 defeat to Newcastle United Foundation, and then a 5-0 loss to West Bromwich Albion Throstles. On paper, it's brutal, and in the table, it leaves them rooted to the bottom on 1 point with a minus 46 goal difference. Gregg, give me your assessment of Muscle Warriors. When a promoted side is taking hits like that, what's the key thing you look to judge whether they are making progress in amongst the difficulty?
It's tough, isn't it? It's tough to judge, tough to commentate on, tough to watch at times. And I can only imagine how tough it is for the players, the parents and the coaching staff, because clearly it just isn't going their way on court at all. They are seriously struggling to create anything going forwards. And defensively, they're getting opened up with relative ease. I was covering a couple of their games, and in the Newcastle especially, I think I commented on how well they at least stuck together, and they have not given up. They're not down tools. They're still trying. So I think that is something that's really important. You need to stick together at times like this. And we've mentioned, of course, in previous podcasts, the impact of international players and the ability to have training time on the court together. You look at their squad and where they're geographically based, it means training time is very hard to come by. I think, Sean Donaghy's obviously in Ireland. Hemi Barnard lives in, near Ipswich sort of way. Dakota Hannum's down near Bournemouth. I mean, my geography's not that great, but I don't know how many miles there is between those. But getting together for one central point for training is going to be extremely difficult. I think that sort of lack of cohesion on court. Throw Hannah Hindley into that as well, up north. Your lack of cohesion's almost guaranteed, and I think that's where the dysfunction is showing on court. But they are, from the outside anyway, it seems they're sticking together. They're trying their hardest. It just isn't working.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really sympathise with Alan Murray because, to the points that you've raised, the training reality, the squad makeup, it means the squad can't build repetition, can't form that shared understanding, and it's always going to be punished in this division because at this level, you do not get time to work it out on the court. You have to arrive with the patterns, with the chemistry, with the trust already in place. And that is the challenge. When these players aren't training together regularly, it impacts every aspect, the spacing, the defensive shape, the restarts, the decision making. I have to emphasize this isn't about effort. It's about cohesion. And Premiership teams do not need many moments to capitalize if your structure or shape slips at any point. It's also why this division is so ruthless, because the small issues can become big scorelines very quickly. Now, watching their games on Saturday, a couple of things stood out to me. And importantly, I think they're things they can work on that will improve results, improve outcomes. Firstly, avoidable individual errors, particularly from goal kicks. At this level, you simply cannot give the ball away from a restart. A loose central ball or pass without a clear outlet immediately invites pressure. And too often that pressure turned into goals. So that's goal kicks would be a big one. Again, I would be saying in training, working on them, but sadly that isn't able to be the case. Secondly, chair angles, anticipation, and readiness. And what I mean by that is when you're sitting deep, you're absorbing pressure. You can't just be reacting to the ball. You have to, if and where possible, be thinking one action, one step ahead. Think, if that ball hits your bumper, where is it going? Whether that comes down to subtle rotations, half turns, adjusting your front bumper angle by a few degrees, so that if it ricochets off you, it goes into space, it goes out of play, it goes towards a teammate, not straight back to an opposition. And too often in game week 3, the shape of the chairs in the defensive walls and structures didn't allow for that to happen. You should always have the picture forming in your head. If this diagonal cross field ball hits me, what happens next? Does it relieve pressure or does it recycle danger? And too often it is the latter. And it's not as if it can't be worked on, because I look at sides around them: GBG Knights, West Bromwich Albion Throssels, Sevenoaks, Middlesbrough. They have players like Jack Ewins, Regan Kemp, James Mason, James Found, who are excellent at this. When the ball hits them, it usually breaks somewhere safe or useful. And that isn't luck at all. It's awareness and chair positioning. And there were moments where Muscle Warriors could have broken away or simply reset the play, but the rebound kept them pinned in. And at this level, that's the difference between staying in a game and chasing it. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those key fundamentals that can just help you out when you're struggling. At least getting rid of the danger and giving your defense time to breathe and, relax. I think for me, one thing that was prevalent throughout the weekend, especially in our game against them, Teesside, was 2-on-1s. They're killing themselves with 2-on-1s. I think referee Dave Morris said I should have booked someone because the amount of 2-on-1s that they were giving away was just cynical almost in the end. There was at least 15 to 20, and then giving teams free kicks to constantly build that pressure. You're going to concede goals, especially when you're conceding goals anyway. You need to do everything you can to cut out silly mistakes like that. So not giving away 2-on-1s and making mistakes in communication and positioning and chair prep are fundamental things that you can control. You can't control what the opposition do sometimes on the court, but if you control what you can control, you're at least giving yourself the best chance, and they're just not doing that at the minute.
Yeah, exactly that. If we assess upcoming fixtures, next up for them is their third round tie in the John Good Group WFA Cup, where they face GBG Knights, and certainly based on the standings, you would give them somewhat of a hope of progressing to the Derby Arena on Saturday, May 9th. In reality, they're probably very much underdogs in that one, because I don't suspect that Sean Donoghue will be coming over for that one-off game. And he played an important role in game week 3, whereby he, beyond the first game, certainly from what I saw, was utilised as the predominant goalkeeper. So Alan Murray took Hannah Hindley out of that role. So that's almost like a free hit. There won't be expectation. They won't put a huge amount of stock behind that one-off game. But in the league is where they want to dedicate their effort, their energy. And in game week 4, it's a busy one. It's an intense one. They play Leeds, Throssell's, Teesside, Aspire, and West Bromwich Albion. So another extremely tough weekend. So the aim won't just be points, I don't think. It will be about tightening up the controllables, to your point, Greg, managing those 2-on-1s and just starting to build that cohesion. Because if they come through that one without any points, and it would be very unlikely that they do come away with points based on the opposition and opposition form, it's almost, and I don't like to say it, building for next season's championship. Because then I think the margins will be too great to make up on the teams above them. Obviously, game week 5 is more favourable. They play the likes of Middlesbrough, GB United and Sevenoaks. So we're seeing, by the way, game week 5 will be the most incredible fixture weekend we've probably ever had in the history of the Premiership, because all 5 top teams play each other and all 4 bottom teams play each other, which is absolutely huge. But there is positives to had. There was successes. There was little glimpses where I'm going, yeah, if you work on that, if you refine that, that will be something to take away from it. I liked Henry Barnard, had some really good opportunities to break. He's 2-touch in reverse. Whilst the final execution didn't necessarily come off on times, the intent was there. So there's little snippets to focus on, but until they train together, sadly, I don't see results going much differently. Let's now progress to 11th in the standings, and we have Sevenoaks. It was another tough weekend on paper. 4 games, 4 defeats. 1-0 to Villa Rockets, 4-0 to West Bromwich Albion, 2-0 to Teesside, and 1-0 to West Bromwich Albion Throstles. They were competitive. They were stubborn. They just couldn't quite get anything from those moments. Greg, when you look at that set of results, particularly the narrow defeats, do you see a side that's close to potentially turning a corner, or one that's just maybe lacking that decisive cutting edge?
Obviously, we both have a soft spot for Sevenoaks, so it hurts. And we have to be obviously completely impartial. I do see a side that is trying and is keeping games close, and they're doing the right things, especially on the edge of the box, where the goalkeeper and the wing on the edge of the box exchange a couple of 1-2s, and then James Mason can switch it. They're doing that a lot. It was something we tried developing when I was there with Adam McAvoy, and James Mason's taken over very well. They're frustrating to play against. They get 4 players behind the ball at times. So going forward, they offer very little. I know in our game against them, my first touch didn't come until the 18 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock when a ball ricocheted all the way up. So they're frustrating to play against. They're keeping it tight. They're keeping themselves in games. They just have to, in the favourable fixtures they have, make those correct decisions. And looking at the table, their goal difference is so much better than the teams around them. Now, Muscle Warriors, GBG Knights. What will haunt them, I think, not from this game week, is from game week 2. That game against Muscle Warriors, where they dominated up until the 35th minute and they gave a goal away. They have those 2 points back that they arguably gave away. That puts them above GBG Knights and into the playoff spot just purely on goal difference. That'll be the thing. That if it doesn't improve come game week 4 and 5, they'll look back and go, we've let ourselves down there. Because obviously they just have to play Muscle Warriors and the teams around them. They've just got to be in those favourable fixtures, doing the good things right and making decisions. But they're a young group, and especially on the wings, Stanley Ball and George Shippey. They brought Chris King in, who showed some good signs, connected with a few 180s that were powerful and across the box. So there's definitely signs of improvement and encouragement for Sevenoaks, especially defensively. They've just got to show them more going forward.
Yeah, I didn't manage to catch a Sevenoaks game this weekend. I was routed to Court B for the entirety of the fixtures, and all of their games I think were on Court A. Um, but for me, the fine margins tell a story, because beyond that 4-0 defeat to West Bromwich Albion, every other game was within reach or narrow. One goal against Villa, two against Teesside, one against Throssels. And when you assess the form of those three particularly, they're not bad results, even in defeat. To your point, what does concern me is the attacking output. 0 goals across the weekend. Because if you're losing 1-0 repeatedly, it means you're asking yourself to defend perfectly for 40 minutes every single game. And at this level, that's just impossible. You have to carry some sort of attacking threat. You have to give the opponent something to think about. And right now, the cutting edge just isn't quite there. Of course, the context matters. This is a side still navigating life without Miles Miller, not just emotionally, but structurally. He was absolutely fundamental to how they played. And that absence inevitably shifts responsibility onto the younger players like Stanley Ball and George Shippey far quicker than anyone would have expected. And we have to remember, this is their first ever season in the Premiership, only their second ever at National League level. They have very much been thrown into the deep end, and they're doing a very good job. But it's just about building that confidence so they can carry that threat forward. They're only 2 points off GBG Knights. Middlesbrough may prove harder to catch given their defensive solidity and the points they've already banked. But Sevenoaks are still very much in that fight. And if you're looking at the run-in, they still have a heavy schedule, as all the bottom teams do. Greenbank, Teesside, Leeds, Aspire. But they've also got really winnable games against GBG Knights, Middlesbrough, Muscle Warriors. If you win those 3 games, I think they'll finish on 12 points.
Yeah.
Historically, that hasn't been enough necessarily to stave off relegation. But because they'll be against those direct rivals, they may be in with a chance. And I think for any of those bottom 3 teams particularly, if you were to offer them the the Premiership playoff position in 10th, they're snapping your arm off. So it's just about getting enough points to get to 10th. That is the target. To your point, it was great to see Chris King feature, a good player, even better person, stepping in to support when needed. And I'll come to you in a minute, Greg. I want to commend Ian Haywood. And I have been very closely affiliated to Sevenoaks ever since I started in Powerchair football back in 2018. And he was an influential, constant figure in Sevenoaks' side then. He was long before I was introduced to Powerchair football. So that's kind of at the Premiership level, Championship level, but also his impact with the Acorn side at the recent Vars Day. I see the influence he has. I see how deeply he cares about this project. And that helps. With the absence of Adam McAvoy obviously joining and becoming the England senior coach, and this team not just navigating the loss of Miles Miller, but some other really key figures, Dan Stevens and Shay Watson, to mention just 2. I'm so proud of this group, and I think Ian Haywood is doing an incredible job to guide them through this stage.
Yeah, Ian's incredible. He just is almost like the glue at this point, alongside the other long-standing people. He just cares so much. He's so passionate. He's a good laugh because, as it happens with obviously the context of me playing Sevenoaks and the context of not having a touch in the first 19 minutes, I did have a lot. We were chatting on the sideline almost at points, exchanging comments, and he understands where they're at. He's not naive to that point. He gets frustrated. I think he had some harsh words for them at points, being like, look, there's some things that we've done in training that you're just clearly not executing right now and making the right decisions. And decision making is the massive one for me. With Sevenoaks, it's just knowing when to do the things you worked on in training and when to recognize that switch on isn't that way, it's the other way. You're playing the pass on the wrong side. But Ian is just a great coach. And like I say, he's the glue for that group. They all look to him to encourage them and keep them going, but also to correct them when they're doing wrong and just offer them pointers. I mean, this is a club that suffered so much change and loss. I mean, Adam leaving, myself moving, Harry Beswick moving, then losing Miles, Dan and Shay, all in the space of 2 years. Any team is going to struggle with that. Any team is going to be down near the bottom. So to be from them even to be still playing and keeping games tight in the Premiership is a massive credit to everyone at the club and Ian especially.
Yeah, knowing the main mentality of players like James Mason and Kyle Alexander, they won't accept drifting down into the Championship. They'll want to be tougher, sharper, more proactive. Right now, they're competitive. The scorelines show that against top caliber opposition, but they need goals because in this division, resilience alone isn't enough. Please come in, Greg.
And that's not a new thing for Sevenoaks.
No.
Like even that's been a thing for years. We even went back on it when I was there. Defensively, we had to, that's what you said, 40 minutes having to defend perfectly because we knew we weren't going to score more than one goal a game. It's not a new thing. This is a historic problem for Sevenoaks. It's not like it's just suddenly developed. So they've got to find a way to turn that around as best they can.
If we assess game week 4, it's no one will be putting a great deal of expectation on their shoulders because they play Greenbank, Teesside, GBG Knights, Newcastle United Foundation and Leeds. So realistically, certainly based on form, you would only earmark that GBG Knights game as one where you're potentially going to come away with 3 points. It's game week 5, assuming that they're still in the race and GBG Knights above them don't make up too much ground, which would be unlikely based on their game week 4 opposition. The race at the bottom, the fight for survival is going to go down to the wire. Next up in the Premiership standings, we have GBG Knights. And again, game week 3 was another tough one in terms of result. 4 games, 4 defeats, a 5-0 loss to Leeds, a 6-0 loss to Aspire, 6-0 to Greenbank, and 2-0 to Villa Rockets. 0 goals scored across the weekend. And to be fair, that run of fixtures, Leeds, Aspire, Greenbank, and Villa, is probably as daunting as it gets in this division. You're facing 4 of the top sides in the league, all in incredible form. Greg, when you look at that run of results and the fact that they didn't register a goal, what concerns you more, the defensive margins or the attacking output? It's a very similar story that we're having across Muscle Warriors, Sevenoaks, GBG Knights, and we'll go on to have about Middlesbrough as well. But give me your assessments.
I will caveat everything I say about GBG Knights this weekend with the fact that, like you with Sevenoaks, I didn't get a chance to call any of their action. I've gone back and had a look at little bits in the couple of days since, obviously recording this on the Wednesday afterwards. I think for me, it's their attacking output rather than the defensive fragility, because you look at the teams they're playing, you expect them to be conceding at least 2 or 3 anyway, just judging on form and table standings. You've just got to be able to show a little bit of glimpses. And I think that's an issue with the teams, like we'll say, going on to Middlesbrough. 3 teams there, Sevenoaks, GBG Knights and Middlesbrough, that are defensively so frustrating to come up against because they will just block and defend. But you don't have to necessarily worry about mostly going forward. They'll have the odd break, the odd chance. But there won't be any sustained periods of pressure where you're under the cosh and having to defend and scrap for your lives. So for me, and this is going to be a bold prediction, right? I'll put my money where my mouth is. I don't think the bottom 3 changes between now and the end of the season. I think I'm putting it out there. That is my prediction. I think that is how it will finish come the end of the season. Possibly the order may switch between Sebos and GBG Knights, but I don't see Middlesbrough being drawn in to that bottom. I just think they have too much about them. I think it is purely, if we're saying Muscle Warriors with the greatest of respects are down, then it is between Sevenoaks and GBG Knights for that who goes down automatically, who it is in the playoff. And the tail advantage at the minute is GBG Knights because they've got the 2 points above them.
Yeah, firstly, I agree. It's the attacking side that stands out most, and it reinforces the same theme. You need goals in this division. Even in defeat, you need moments to build from, something to carry forward into teams around you. And I said after game week 1 and game week 2 that I was excited by GBG Knights, and also the fact that they remind me a lot of their sister club, GBG Saracens, in the Championship. In that, despite results not necessarily going their way, I felt optimistic that they would find that rhythm, they would find some form. Game week 3 didn't quite show that progression. I was a little bit frustrated. Now, the caliber of opposition has to be acknowledged completely. It would have been incredibly hard to get anything from them games, or even score for that matter. But I'm almost more interested in the approach and the tactics of GBG Knights. For the most part, they're setting up with Jack Ewins in the goalkeeper shirt and Oscar Smedley in the more defensive role behind him, which allows Jack to roam. And I've said it publicly before, I've said it to them in person. I think Jack is their most important player. He is key to everything defensively and central to their transitions. The question is, are they attacking with enough conviction? Are they being brave enough trying to get up the court? And the only reason I ask that is Oscar Smedley last season in the Championship registered 15 goals and 26 assists, 41 goal contributions. If in itself that's impressive, without mentioning the fact that was his debut season at National League level. The step up to Premiership, of course, changes the risk. Completely it does. You can't be as expansive without being punished. But this season, in 25-26, Oscar has 1 goal and no assists. And that feels more reflective of the role that he's being asked to perform rather than ability. So I'd like to see them be braver with his utilisation. Whether that's Oscar more central with Jack dropping back, or perhaps Kai anchoring the base of the system with Jack in the centre, Oscar and George out wide, but with kind of the license to roam and rotate. Because right now it feels slightly rigid and they're persisting with a system that isn't necessarily working. And I say this from a position of belief because I work with Oscar closely on the talent programme. In the Midlands cohort, he's the only current Premiership player and one of the highest regarded players across the whole pathway. But in those individual one-off days, he shows why he's good enough. The challenge now is translating it at National League level. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and when you mentioned tactics, I did think maybe moving Kai back and putting Oscar on the wing would be the obvious switch, or the most logical switch, should we say, just to give him, see if that works. I mean, what have you got to lose at this point? You've got to try, if you want to try and get yourself out of that, even that playoff spot, or making sure you don't get dragged into that battle with Sevenoaks, from my point of view, for that automatic relegation spot, you might as well trust him. Because I don't think putting Kai back and Oscar out wide is going to make you any worse. It certainly isn't. And if in one game it doesn't work, you've got the option to just switch it back. But what have you got to lose at this point? And you've got everything to gain.
Yeah, I completely agree. As mentioned with Muscle Warriors, they have a cup game against one another in the coming weeks. So that may be an opportunity to test and trial different systems I think they are afforded a little bit more flexibility when it comes to training, with their players being far more condensed than that of Muscle Warriors. So maybe something to work on in training as well. Just separately, because I just remembered, in GBG Knights' game against Greenbank, there was an interesting moment involving Oscar Smedley that's worth clarifying. Oscar left the court in prevention of a clear goal scoring opportunity. Historically, that situation has almost always resulted in a red card and a penalty to the opposition, a ruling I've never been entirely comfortable with, if I'm honest. However, FIFA have recently provided clearer guidance on the exact distinction. So if a player starts on the court, engages with the ball, and then ends up leaving the court in the process of preventing a goal, that is now deemed a yellow card and an indirect free kick. If a player deliberately leaves the court before engaging the ball and then prevents it from crossing the line, it remains a red card and a penalty. So in Oscar's case, he engaged the ball first. He found himself off the court in the action of stopping it. So under the updated clarification, a yellow card and an indirect free kick was the outcome. Yeah, I thought before it was really harsh. It was really unclear, not just for the players or the coaches, but the fans as well, because there's never really. It's not like they're cheating in prevention of the ball going over the line. Sorry. And I could sense that a lot of people in and around the Leeds Westwood Sports Centre were expecting Jeff Lewis to reach into his pocket and bring out a red. But no, yellow card, correct distinction. And now I have no problems with that ruling whatsoever. There's a clear red card offence and there is a lesser yellow card offence as well. So you don't have that double jeopardy element as well. So important to know, I think. But just back to GBG Knights, despite those 4 losses, they are above the relegation zone. They just need a clearer attacking identity. And I think for any of the 3 teams we've spoken about so far, as already mentioned, the 10th place playoff is probably the best possible outcome. I hope that's not unfair to say, because of Middlesbrough and Throstle's form, who we'll talk about shortly. But that being said, Greg, we watch a lot of Championship football. That 10th place playoff position against whoever finishes 3rd in the Championship is not an easy tie, because that's likely to be one of either Nottinghamshire, Teesside Steel, or Manchester United, certainly based on the current standings. So not necessarily a guarantee you play your football in the top flight in 26-27, but anything that doesn't result in automatic relegation will surely be seen as a huge plus. If we are assessing GBG Knights' fixtures in game week 4, it is a 5-fixture weekend against Teesside, Aspire, Sevenoaks, Newcastle and Middlesbrough. A weekend split between some title contenders and 3 fixtures that could shape survival hopes. But in summary, I don't think they need wholesale changes. They just need bravery, they need intent, and they need to unlock the potential that is clearly there.
It's that Sevenoaks game, and that Sevenoaks game will be massive.
Potentially even the Borough game as well, to be honest.
Yeah, true. But for me, I mean, I'm calling it way too early, but that Borough GBG Knights game just has one of those 0-0 written all over it, feels. Unless something happens in training going forward for GBG Knights, you'd give the edge if someone was to score to Borough, but it has a 0-0 feel about it.
I think that's the perfect place to progress onto Middlesbrough, who sits 9th in the standings. And this was a weekend that didn't quite reflect how it began, because they opened with a 0-0 draw against Aspire, which sent a real message around the Leeds Westwood Sports Centre to hold the then league leaders. They stayed compact, they stayed disciplined, organised. It felt like a platform we would see them then build upon. But from there, a 3-0 defeat to Leeds, a 2-0 loss to Teesside, and a 2-0 defeat to Villa Rockets. 1 point from 4 games, 0 goals scored. And once again, we're seeing the emerging pattern. The bottom 4 sides all failed to register a single goal across the weekend. And I'm sure Jeff Lewis is listening. I want to challenge him to try and find me a weekend where the bottom 4 teams did not score. Because whilst based on the standings, they're going to be the ones that ship a lot of goals, but that as a statistic, when they're all fighting for their position in the top flight, just amazed me. Greg, when referencing Middlesbrough, is it purely the difficulty of the fixtures, or again, does it show that attacking output at this end of the table has to improve quickly? Because whilst we've said that Middlesbrough have a nice buffer over the teams above them, it's still only 3 points above the playoffs and 5 points above automatic relegation, which we know can change in a split second.
And they've played a game more.
Wow,
As well.
Yeah, that does need referencing.
GBG Knights have a game in hand, so do Sevenoaks, and obviously they will play each other. For Borough, I think, and I've already obviously made my bed about how the bottom 3 are going to stay as they are, so I'm obviously not going to go back on that. I think it's more the fixture list, and they obviously did an incredible job in the 0-0 draw with Aspire. I didn't get to watch it because I was playing on the other court at the same time. They're just a really frustrating team to play against, and I mean that with the greatest respect, because I remember at the Championship weekend, the weekend before, Karen Goldsborough asked me, who are the team? No, when you look at the fixture list, who are the teams that you're like, oh God, we've got to play them? You know, who have we got? And I went, Leeds, because obviously they're just a super team of 4, and Middlesbrough, because you just know they're they're so hard to break down. I'd throw Greenbank into that conversation as well. You just know that Middlesbrough could just defensively be so solid with that combination of James Found and Umar Hanif. Cathcall's on the edge of the box. They've got outlets. Carl Forster, Ethan Galloway, Tom Pettigrew. They want to frustrate you. They want to block you in. And there are signs, I think, going forward. For me, they have the quality. That's, for me, where it lies. They have the quality going forward with the likes of, like I said, Kath Goldsberg, Ethan Galloway, Carl Forster. You know, 2 of those are senior international figures for both Scotland and Northern Ireland, respectfully. So I have too much about them to be drawn into that bottom 3, as I've already said. They just need to make sure they do their jobs. Because I'm a big fan of James Found as well in goal. I think he can, when he wants to play, and the opportunity arises when the ball's coming back to him, he's not afraid to, do a full spin or play a half spin pass. He has the ability, I think, to play in a more expansive system.
Yeah, Aspire Leeds Teesside in your first 3 games is about as tough as it gets in this division. There wouldn't have been any expectation to get points there, realistically. Not many goals either. The Villa Rockets game is probably the one worth isolating, because from what I saw, they were competitive, they were physical in the wars, they always give as good as they get, and it was just a few decisive moments we saw it slip away, one of which a penalty dispatched by Dave Lewis. I think it had to be taken multiple times with James Found a little bit too eager moving on the line. And despite the results, like you, I'm incredibly encouraged by the partnership, particularly between Umar Hanif and James Found. There is real structure, there is calmness, they complement each other really well. But the player I'm impressed most by in Gameweek 3 was Ethan Galloway. I thought he was outstanding. Strong in the centre, aggressive in the dribble, breaking up opposition momentum time and time again. He was stopping the transitions before they developed and giving his side small moments to reset. The reality, I do know, is that he was largely firefighting. He was having to be reactive rather than proactive, which is no criticism when you're facing Aspire, Leeds or Teesside. What I'd really like to see is Ethan used centrally in a game where Middlesbrough are actively trying to impose themselves, trying to attack, trying to win. And then I'm going to ask the questions, can he link defence and attack? Can he drive through the middle that maybe allows Umar Hanif to operate higher and wider? Because Umar's a very versatile player who isn't quite maximising his potential at the moment. And if that's possible, it changes their attacking shape completely. But either way, Ethan was brilliant in and amongst 4 defeats, and he potentially gives Caroline Goldsbert a few positive selection headaches going into game week 4. But it still comes back to the same theme. You cannot necessarily defend your way to safety alone in this division. Game week 4 has Throssels, Villa, West Bromwich Albion and GBG Knights. So a far more balanced set of fixtures compared to some of the teams below them. Throssels and GBG Knights are winnable. Villa and West Brom going to be a little bit more competitive, but certainly not out of reach. Do you agree?
Yeah, and to your point about selection, there's the obvious, I think if anyone watches Middlesbrough, there's the obvious 10-minute rotation policy between Ethan Galloway and Carl Forster. So whoever starts has the first 10 minutes, then on the 10-minute mark, they'll be subbed and swapped over to the point where I think in the second half, I joked with Carl Forster and went, I'll start my watch now, and in 10 minutes, Ethan will be on. And it just is how they're choosing to go about it. And that's obviously to keep everyone happy because they've got a large squad and you've got to do what you've got to do to make it work for you. I think I'd like to see Forster and Galloway play on the wings together a little bit more than they currently are. Just from what we saw in Italy from both of them, I think there's a lot of potential there. That is no disrespect to Cass Goldsborough or Tom Pettigrew, who are also excellent players, and Cass gets stuck in, especially with the defensive work, absolutely on the edge of the box. So in games where they want to impose themselves more, so like the GBG Knights, the Throssels, when they play Muscle Warriors, maybe they play Forster and Galloway, see if they can get a few goals on board. Not to say that Cass Goldsborough can't do that, but I'm just looking at potential and the players they have at their disposal. So, but yeah, they're doing what works for them at the minute. And if that keeps them up above, out of the relegation race, then all power to them. Because like I said, they are frustrating to play against.
Just quickly, their next fixture falls against Manchester United in the Jonga Group WFA Cup. And I know we spoke about that a few weeks ago when we was previewing some of the upcoming fixtures, and I in it said that I fancy Manchester United to get the job done. So I think that for me will be a perfect test to see how brave they are, how much they respect or don't respect their championship opponents. We know that Manchester United, with their current squad, whether it's this season or next, are destined for the Premiership. So it's a perfect opportunity to trial those systems. Again, with those one-off games, I don't know if the Scotland internationals will be coming down because it's an incredibly long way to come for a one-off game. But it's one that I'll certainly be looking out for and eager to see what the end outcome is. Now in 8th we have West Bromwich Albion Throssels, and I think it's fair to say, Greg, this is one of the most impressive transformation stories in the division. Their game week 3 went as follows: 1-1 draw with Villa Rocket, a narrow 2-1 defeat to Newcastle United Foundation, a 1-0 loss to Greenbank, a 1-0 win over Sevenoaks, and a clinical 5-0 victory against Muscle Warriors. And even in those defeats, you can see how incredibly fine the margins are, both coming by just a single goal. Greg, give me your assessments for Throssels, because based on expectation coming into this season, they are outperforming every single metric possible.
Yeah, it has been some improvement from what we saw last season. They just seem to be enjoying their football. They've got a core group of 3 for me in Reg Kemp, Abby Bolton, Tom Donaher, who is, you can see the impact that Tom Donaher is having when he plays in a team. So we saw him with Norwich last year and how it didn't really work. The Norwich were same the issues with international players, but he has the quality. We saw that in Italy. I go back to keep referencing that Nations Cup. He is able to show that a lot more in this team. And then they have a rotation behind them of Parth Gakwad, if he wants to come and play defensively, is really solid. Reg Kemp. Amy Julian comes in. Amy Wharton was excellent when coming off the bench. Along with John O'Davis, they've got a lot of options, big squad. Abigail Bolt, again, voted unsung player of the weekend. They showed maturity and an ability in their game against Villa Rockets. First game of the weekend, I called at 9:30 Saturday morning. Villa had chances to kill the game off. And we'll reference this, we're talking about Villa later on. Brussels rode their luck at times, but had one chance. They created one chance in the last 5 minutes. And Abigail Bolt buried it. It was against the run of play, but they took that one chance and got a point out of a game that they probably shouldn't have got a point out of, and that is the sign of a good team.
Worth noting that they scored 7 goals across the entirety of the 24-25 season. They scored 8 this weekend alone. The difference is night and day. And I do want to say, Colin Gordon, their coach last season, is one of the most brilliant minds in the sport. No question about it. But he didn't quite have the player profile required to fully implement his system. The ideas were there, the fit just wasn't. This season, under the guidance of Abby Bolt and Pete Westmoreland, they look like a side reborn. They are confident, they are composed, they are organised, they are adaptable. And to expand on your point about the different systems that they can adopt in tougher fixtures, when they need to dig in, is Parth Gakwad, who sits at the base of the formation. He was my unsung hero of the weekend. And just hearing you reference that core starting 3, it's a starting 4 now with Parth at the base. He is playing with maturity and confidence like I've never seen before. Maybe in his time with Brighton, but he is forming an outstanding partnership with Regan Kemp, who remains one of the toughest players in the division to break down. That base gives them security, and ahead of that, the partnership you've referenced, Abigail Bolt, Thomas Donaher, who combine beautifully, intelligently, with clear chemistry. And he almost defies the odds, doesn't he, Thomas? Because all of the other internationals we've seen come from Ireland or Northern Ireland are struggling at the moment because they're not getting that regular training time. It doesn't necessarily apply to Thomas Donaher. It looks as if he trains week in, week out within that system. So that's kind of the defensive pragmatic style that they tend to adopt, but then when they want to be proactive, they want to attack, they can adjust. And then Regan drops deep. Amy Lee Julian takes the place of Parth Gakwad to take control centrally, and the shape shifts with relative ease. I would, and I emphasize would in the past tense, have challenged them to be more ruthless, because all of their 5 victories leading up to their final fixture this weekend were settled 1-0. Disciplined and controlled, absolutely, but very narrow. And we know in this division, 1-0 can turn to 1-1 very quickly. 1-1 can turn to 2-1 in the opposition's favour very quickly. But that question was emphatically answered against Muscle Warriors. A 5-0 performance, their most comprehensive league win since the 10th of December 2022, when they beat AFC Bournemouth Warriors 5-0 as well. So really clinical. And I think I may be corrected. I think all 5 of those goals came in the first half as well. A few individual milestones to note. Abigail Bolt's hat-trick against Muscle Warriors makes her only the 8th female hat-trick scorer in the history of the Premiership, and just the 6th since the current 2-division format was introduced. So we've got Kath Goldsborough on 15, Rosie Hodgson with 8, Faye Stevenson with 5, Amy Wharton and Jessica Moat both with 3, Lizzie Tullett with 2, and Rhoda Dodds with 1. You reference Amy Wharton. Her goal this weekend marked her 50th Premiership goal for West Bromwich Albion Throttles. She becomes the first Throttles player ever to reach that milestone, and is now their all-time leading goal scorer. 31 players have scored 50 or more Premiership goals for a single club, but only one player in history has done it for more than 2 teams. Do you know who?
Oh, every week,
You should
every
know this by now.
every podcast, there is some sort of "let's make Greg look stupid with his lack of ball knowledge" segment. I'm trying to think who's played for 2 teams for a long time. No, you've got me here.
Terrible. It is your teammate, Mr. Ed Common. He has scored 50 plus goals for the under and Teesside.
Embarrassing.
But more overarching, when we talk about Throttles, they may not be mathematically assured of safety, but there is absolutely zero chance they get dragged into jeopardy. They now have the safety net. The conversation now changes. Could they target a top half finish? It would mean leapfrogging 2 of Newcastle, Villa or West Brom, but they're not far off any of them. And if you said that at the end of last season, very few would have believed you. And then just to second your point, congratulating Abigail Bolt, who was voted the Swizzles Unsung Hero of the Weekend for the second time, which reflects not just her impact on the court, but her leadership, her influence, the respect she's earning from her peers and opposition alike. Game week 4, they face Middlesbrough, they face Muscle Warriors, they face Aspire and Teesside. So if you're mapping that out realistically, the goal from Saturday has to be clear. Maximum points. Middlesbrough and Muscle Warriors are the fixtures where they need to be controlled, professional, ruthless. And if they take 6 points there, it probably shifts the psychology heading into Sunday, because then Aspire and Teesside almost are like free hits, opportunities to test themselves against the elite without that desperation creeping in. But that is the luxury you earn when you handle your business early on in the season. It's as simple as that. Let's now progress to Villa Rockets in 7th, who leave at game week 3 with 10 points from 5 matches, 7th in the standings. Their weekend unfolded with a 1-1 draw against West Bromwich Albion Throttles, a 1-0 win over Sevenoaks, a 2-0 win over GBG Knights, a 4-0 defeat to Leeds, and then a 2-0 victory over Middlesbrough. 3 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss, 10 points, 3 clean sheets, and the only game where they were properly opened up was arguably against the most relentless attacking side in the division, so you can almost accept it. Greg, is this now a side we stop questioning and start recognising as a top Premiership outfit?
I think that we're seeing the squads that they put together this season starting to click a little bit. The quality they brought in, making the couple of summer signings. Roger Hodger coming in, she got her first goal for Villa this weekend. You see the impact, having that other winger on the other side to complement the likes of Dave Lewis, Hums Madeir, Bubba. They've got Bobby Allen, who's still playing, despite, the fact that he's going through so much himself. Is credit to him. Kieran Burns, they've put quality and experience in there. So it's starting to click for them and starting to show that what they're doing in training is working. They just need to be a little bit more clinical. I reference when speaking about Throttles, that game Saturday morning where they had chances to kill the game off and make it 2 or 3-0, and they've been then moving up the table a bit more with a couple more points. And then one moment for Throttles, they got opened up and they kind of threw away 2 points there. They then came back in. This time, they were 1-0 up against Sevenoaks, but they saw the game out. They learned from their mistakes, and that's what you want to do. If you're going to make mistakes and you're going to throw away a couple of points, don't repeat it. And they didn't do that. Leeds is a free hit for any team that isn't involved in the title race. You might as well try it because you know that you're going to be under the cosh. That team is just incredible. And on the Sunday, they'd have expected a tough game against, Middlesbrough, especially given what they saw on the Saturday for them versus Spire. But they got a cultured performance, a cultured win, and they did their business. They handled their business, and they're just able to say, look, if you're below us, we'll punish you. If you're above us, we're going to give you a good game. And that's what they'll be happy with right now.
For me, this is the weekend where Villa answered a lot of lingering doubts, including many of my own. Because early in the season, I haven't shied away from the fact that I said I'm not fully convinced how this squad gels together. They're big personalities, defined roles, strong opinions, and I didn't know whether that collective would harmonise. 3 game weeks in, I'd say with a degree of confidence that this is one of the most balanced, harmonised squads in the division. There is clarity, there is structure, there is buy-in. Defensively, they've been excellent. Against Throssels, it was tight. It was tactical. Against Sevenoaks, it was disciplined. Against GB Giants and Middlesbrough, it was controlled and professional. They look comfortable protecting the lead, but more importantly, unlike some of the teams below them, they're capable of extending their lead, and that's a big distinction. Hamza Madir, by the way, unlucky not to be in the fantasy team of the weekend, as the same can be applied to Bobby Allen as well. But Hamza has been nurtured into such an important piece in this side. He is learning under Bubba, which has clearly accelerated his development. He is determined, he is versatile, increasingly confident in possession, and he provides that platform that allows others to play. You can see the trust that's placed into him. Dave Lewis continues to impress. Love him as a player. He's a season and a half into his Villa spell now, and he looks settled, used across multiple positions again this weekend. And that flexibility really matters. He channels his intensity correctly. There's experience there, and the experience that shows in the key moments. Now, Greg, I was thinking, and when it comes to Dave Lewis, looking at how comfortable he is in any of the roles, how dependable he is, irrelevant of where you play him, it got me thinking, if you could clone one player 4 times and play them in the 4 positions to comprise a squad, who would make a genuinely title contending side? Think about complete balance, chemistry, proficiency. I know there's players that are good in all positions, but I want ones that are great in all positions. I've got 3 that spring to mind, Dave Lewis being one of them.
Yeah, Dave Lewis would be obviously one of them. Can I redeem myself and say Ed Common? Because I completely forgot that.
As first pivot and goalkeeper, you think he would do a really, really solid job?
Yes.
Okay, you can have Ed Common then.
I genuinely do. And I think we've seen it tried for England as well. We're seeing it tried a little bit where sometimes, especially in, our home nations last year, we saw it a little bit. So I'm going to throw Ed Common in there. I can make an argument for it at least. Who else am I thinking? Today, that's a good question. It's a very good question. You're full of those today, aren't you?
Thank you. Is one that anyone can contribute to on YouTube or the comment section when we post this podcast. I have Dave Lewis because I think he's brilliant in all 4 positions. You don't see that dip. I've got Chris Gordon, one of the best goalkeeper first pivots, can play centrally, so good out wide, underrated out wide, it must be said. And then I've got Ethan Fisher, who, again, I think can play. Don't get me wrong, any of the current England internationals, senior England internationals, could do a good job in any of the 4 positions. But I want ones that will excel, and they've played a lot of minutes and are comfortable in each of the 4 positions. So they were my considerations. But anyway, I I digress. Back to Villa. Bobby Allen impressed me as well. When he feels confident, he plays confident. He's brave in the dribble, mature in his decision making, as you've already alluded to, playing through some physical discomfort at the moment, which makes the output even more commendable. And he got some really important goals across game week 3. Rosie Hodgson, there was definitely a few heads turned when she made the move to Villa in the summer. And one thing Rosie has always enjoyed doing is silencing the critics. She understands the levels expected of her. When you arrive at a side like Villa, there's a natural assumption you're going to bring the goals, the decisive moments, as she has done so for Aspire for so many years. And the goals are the headline stat that people focus on. Now, I actually think she's been really positive in other areas. Her movement, her link-up play, her work rate, her energy, but goals are what people gravitate towards. So the longer she went without scoring a National League goal, the longer the doubts start to creep in to people's minds. But she dealt with it very quickly. 5 minutes into that opener against West Bromwich Albion Throstle, she finds the back of the net. And you could see that shift instantly. The confidence almost returned, the sharpness increased. And she played like someone who just had a huge weight lifted. And once that burden goes, you're watching a very dangerous player again. 2 goals, 4 assists she has this season, so 6 goal contributions. I'd challenge her to finish on 12 by season's end. Double her current output by the time game week 5 concludes. Bubba, or Amit Ali, he's 99th Premiership goal for Villa. Number 99, scoring 99. It's almost poetic, isn't it? But only 11 players in the history of the Premiership have scored more goals for a single club, and all of them did so at Aspire, Northern Thunder, or West Bromwich Albion. So he has expanded that pack. He's in elite company. So congratulations to him for that. We've spoken briefly about the 4-0 defeat to Leeds, which is somewhat of a reality check. It does show the gap at the absolute top when you're not at your sharpest. But what impressed me most was the response. There was no hangover. There was no drift. Straight back into a controlled 2-0 win over Middlesbrough, who far better teams have struggled against than that of Villa. And then I suppose it's the mentality piece. I think you touched on it at the start of your kind of assessment. They're focusing more on the dropped points against Throssels rather than celebrating the 10 from 15. And that tells you that this isn't a side satisfied with just being competitive. They want 3 points in every game, irrelevant of opposition. And I can't remember the last time, that was the case with Villa. Can you?
No. And it's good to see that progression. And it's good to see, like you said, there was some, when this squad was put together, you were trying to work out how it would link together, how they would all gel. And to their credit, you are seeing a harmonious group on the court, all getting along, all pulling in the same direction. And it's been a positive impact on everyone. I was going to reference the facts about, Bubba getting his 99th goal for number 99, a player that's been a stalwart in the National League. He, for me, reminds me a lot. We spoke last week for the Championship recap about the impact Laura Evans has for Manchester United. The other players in the team get the headlines, but they are always that dependable aspect at the back that is going to be strong and stable. I've said it on commentary. Bubba, for me, is that for Villa. Just Mr. Dependable. He will bring the ball forward. He will block most shots. And can play some excellent passes too, by the way. He just is Mr. Dependable for Villa. You never need to worry about what he's going to do on the court. Dave Lewis, who said it, he's channeling his aggression a lot better. I mean, they put on Facebook stats, it's 315 days since he last got booked, which a few of us did have a bit of a laugh and joke about. I suggested that a decimal point had been missed somewhere in that number, but Dave is one of the great characters of our game. And to your point, you can clone him and put him anywhere on the court and he will do an excellent job for you. So yeah, really pleased with Villa. And the fact that they're focusing on those 2 points dropped rather than the 10 they've got shows in their mindset they're not resting on their laurels. That's what they need, is they look above the table, not below them.
Exactly that. I mean, they're joint on points with both Newcastle United Foundation and West Bromwich Albion. It's just an inferior goal difference, which doesn't see them kind of in that top half, but that will surely be the goal and the aspiration for the remaining games of the season. Next up for them in the Jonga Group WFA Cup, they play Aspire. So again, another fantastic test. They will want to get to Derby. They will want to dethrone the current champions. And then if we're focusing on game week 4, Middlesbrough, Newcastle United Foundation, Teesside and Greenbank. So some incredibly tough games, but ones you'd very much expect them to be competitive in.
You referenced Philip's goal difference. How satisfying is it to have a goal difference of 0, by the way? See that in the table. As Thanos said, all things perfectly balanced as they should be. The amount of goals scored equaling the amount of goals conceded. That's quite satisfying.
Yeah, it certainly is. It shows that they score goals, but they also concede goals. But it's probably why they're pretty much smack bang in the middle of the pack. Next in the standings, we have Newcastle United Foundation moving into the top half. Game week 3 reads as follows: a 1-0 defeat to West Bromwich Albion, a 2-1 win over West Bromwich Albion Throttles, a 1-0 loss to Aspire, a 3-0 win over Muscle Warriors, and a narrow 2-1 defeat to Greenbank. 6 points from 5 matches, 2 wins, 3 defeats, and importantly, I think every single defeat by just a single goal. Gregg, when you look at that return, does it feel like a side falling short or one that's still very much developing amidst the rebuild?
Newcastle are the team I've looked forward to talking about on this podcast the most. Really. Genuinely, because it's for reasons that I will explain. They got so unfortunate this weekend. I think they got a massive unlucky rub of the green. Against West Brom, they were superb for 39 minutes and 30 seconds. And it was just one moment right at the end where West Brom finally carved them open. Defensively, they were outstanding. And going forward, they created chances to undo West Brom. Yes, you could argue that's not exactly luck. That's, maybe they took their eye off the ball before the 40 minutes was up. But when referencing the opposition they're playing, I think they can say, look, we were so unfortunate to get a draw out of that, and I think they deserve to draw. They bounced back with a win against Throttles and played some excellent football again. The Aspire game, I was commentating on court at the time. I think it was something, all about a player. I turned my head to court B as the yell went in. The goal that went in is one of those that's so annoying as a defending team, just jumped over the bumper. It bounced over the bumper and there's nothing you can do about it. So to concede that, go on, you look like you want to correct me there, Ryan. Do you want to?
No, I don't think it did go over the bumper. I know what you're referring to, but it was, I think the angle of the camera and where you was probably sitting made it look worse than it was. But please carry on.
Oh, good, because you can see how passionate I am here. Okay, so maybe it didn't go over the bumper. It's just one of those bits. It was in the air. It certainly was in the air.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Maybe it was the angle I was sat that made it look like it went over. But again, 1-0 to Aspire. No shame in that defeat. And then get another win on the Sunday. Greenbank will be the one. There was no Marcus Harrison in that game for Greenbank. You take Marcus Harrison out of any team, they're going to be weakened. Which I think when we got to Greenbank shows more strength to Greenbank. But they were slightly disappointed they'd come out of that with at least a point. Bearing in mind they went 1-0 down, got an equaliser, then conceded again to lose the game. That'd be the one game possibly. But there was a lot of misfortune, I think, for Newcastle this weekend, and they could take a lot of pride in their performances. One person I will big up is Ollie Crawshaw, because he was my unsung player of the weekend, and I've told him I would big him up on this podcast. I thought he was excellent defensively. He is really growing into the void that Ethan Fisher left in the middle when he moved to Leeds. For me, he's gone from a winger and a wide player to having to do everything from that first pivot, creative standpoint when they attack, but also that real hard graft defensively when they're under the cosh against teams. I thought he was superb. Some of the passes he was playing were excellent, top class. And like I said, he was my unsung player of the weekend.
He's another one that could fall into the bracket of, if you were to clone them 4 times, they would do a very, very good job. And you kind of beat me to the punch there, because I have your submission for the Swizzles team of the weekend and fantasy team of the weekend, and I was going to say about Ollie Crawshaw. But for me, Newcastle are exactly what we expected them to be this season, in transition, still testing, still refining, never easy to beat. Ollie Crawshaw, as he always is, central to everything Newcastle do in defence, in attack. Now wearing the goalkeeper shirt, I do wonder whether that's part of a longer term plan assessment around his progression through the England pathway. Is that first pivot goalkeeper role his best opportunity to break into the senior side? Because players on the cusp have to be thinking about the gaps that may arise in and around Adam McAvoy's squad. It's just the way it is. And having assessed the England development players closely, he's one knocking firmly on the door alongside players like yourself and Dan Rigby, perhaps not necessarily for 26, but certainly beyond the Argentina World Cup. Cole Simpson is another I really like. Intelligent, sharp, clinical in moments. I did comment that this weekend there was a slight tendency for him to be drawn into the central areas, which sometimes exposed them to 2-on-1s, which have really affected their width. I don't know whether that's kind of muscle memory from his years playing centrally with Hull and East Yorkshire and the fluid system we know Ollie Crawshaw adopts. It may have been instructed of him by Jamie Harrison, I don't know, but that's something that occasionally leaves Newcastle vulnerable in transitions. But again, as we've spoken about multiple times, Newcastle have their starting 3. They have Lee Armstrong, they have Ollie Crawshaw, they have Cole Simpson, and then it's that 4th winger role which is shared across Sam Mackay, Matty Harrison, Aaron Guthrie and Kieran Steer, the last one of which is probably top of that list currently. It probably isn't unfair to say. Certainly gets stuck in, showing that real Scottish grit. It was the Frossels fixture for me that showed exactly why Newcastle remained so dangerous. They went behind. They did not panic at all. The same can probably be applied to the Greenbank game, although I didn't watch it. And I know the result eventually didn't go their way. But they don't get flustered. And particularly in that Throstles game, Matty Harrison was introduced in the late stages of the first half, scored within about 5 seconds of his introduction. His very first touch saw the ball guided past Gaquad and Regan Kemp in the Throttles goal, and then Cole Simpson dispatched the winner later on. Just on Matty Harrison, he became only the 5th player in Premiership history to score for 4 different teams. Don't worry, Greg, I won't ask you. Middlesbrough, Northern Thunder Blues, and now Newcastle. He failed to score in his most recent spells with Nottinghamshire and West Bromwich Albion Throstle, which makes that stat even more interesting. The others to achieve that particular milestone: Lee Armstrong, Sam Smith, Rob Thompson and Jake Hudson. But as mentioned, even the defeats were narrow. 1-0 to West Brom, 1-0 to Aspire, 2-1 to Greenbank. No one blows Newcastle away. Yes, Leeds had that very successful result back in December, but that felt like an anomaly, a blip that Newcastle are more than entitled to once in a while. But the take home for me, like you, is excitement. And all of it is guided by one of the top coaches in the country in Jamie Harrison. This is a side developing, but when they settle, Newcastle have the potential to be a real force again, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. They're guided by one of the best coaches in the country. They've got a couple of the best young talents in the country. When you look at, joining on the NETP and the development squad, Cole Simpson, Ollie Crawshaw, Sam Mackay's young. They're bringing it. They've got what for me is they've got a brilliant blend of youth and experience. Newcastle, really good. The Armstrong, Matty Harrison, they're the experienced heads guiding the likes of Ollie Crawshaw, Cole Simpson, Sam Mackay, Kieran Steer to an extent, although he's not younger is new to the English game. Aaron Guthrie in there, sort of the glue within the squad. They've got a brilliant blend of that youth and experience.
Next up for Newcastle United Foundation, they play Altrincham in the Cup. One you'd very much expect them to come through. So maybe we'll see them go on a cup run. Of course, they were in the John Gregg Group WFA Cup final in 23-24, I believe, where they lost 2-0 to Aspire. So they will no doubt want to get to those latter stages and show what they're all about. And then if we progress to game week 4 of the Premiership, they start against Greenbank before playing Villa Rockets, GBG Knights and Sevenoaks. So a tough start, but beyond that point, one that they will certainly go in with the expectation of getting 3 wins from 3. Let's now progress to West Bromwich Albion in 5th, a side I was incredibly excited to watch and commentate on. So of course it's ironic that I found myself on the opposite court for all of their games this weekend. I didn't get to call them live, including the introduction of USA international Zach Dickey. I didn't see them, but I certainly heard them. Let's start with the results. They beat Newcastle 1-0. They dispatched Sevenoaks 4-0, but then lost 2-0 to Teesside and 1-0 to Greenbank. 6 points from 4 games. And that probably sums them up right now. Competitive, solid, but just a little bit short in the bigger fixtures. Greg, do you feel like that's about par for what you expect from West Brom, or do you think they should have achieved a little bit more?
Firstly, I made sure I definitely commentated on West Brom this weekend. I suppose, to be fair, I didn't know when doing the road, we didn't know just about the news and the signings. So I got a bit fortunate, or lie, but I'm going to claim genius. For me, West Brom, they're just going through a little bit of emotions, a transition. They're working out where they are compared to the level, because the level has certainly raised somewhat. That's fair to say. There are things from West Brom, you're guaranteed that are part of the DNA. That fluid passing, a 4-out system they sort of persist with, maybe a bit of a 3.5 when it gets into games against teams such as, I served at Teesside and Greenbank. But going forward, it's trying to, insert yourselves right into the game, dominate, play some fluid passing. I think for me, their work in and up to and slightly in and around the box was excellent. It was just that final pass or the final shot where sometimes they were afraid to take on the shot and they were trying to pass it like one pass too many, or sometimes they weren't just getting the right contact or decision making. That is what was their undoing all weekend. And you look like you agree with me.
Having watched the games back, firstly, I feel very positive about them. And secondly, completely agree with what you're saying. They are so close. Against Greenbank, it's one bit of decision making. Against Teesside, it's 1 or 2 moments in the final third. They do all of the hard work to get it into those dangerous areas. Their structure is good. Their build-up play is good. They're disciplined with and without the ball. It's just the final action, which isn't quite there. If Lucas Chrysler attacks that back post with his front bumper against Teesside, it's 1-1. If Chris Gordon commits to the 180 against Greenbank, I know you was calling it at the time, it's 1-1. It's those decisions that are make or break the result, and they are so close. And they're teams that we are expecting to go right down to the wire for the title race, and they are millimeters away from registering points in those. But that is how tight the margins are. And that's why this is in no way a criticism of ability. They absolutely have the squad to compete in that top bracket of the division. Let's assess some of the players. We've got to start with Zach Dickey. even without being on commentary for his games, you could feel his presence. We have been a huge fan of his since the 2023 World Cup. And that only grew when I travelled to Paris for the Club World Cup, where he represented Western Sydney Wanderers. He carries himself like a professional in every sense, but with a personality that lifts everyone around him. He is relentlessly positive. He plays with energy, with edge. His dead ball execution has that American quality that really stands out. The power, the contact, the confidence to take on responsibility. There was no nerves whatsoever. And it's not just about what he does technically. I mean, you may have seen the Albion Foundation released an interview with him yesterday, which summed it up perfectly. He was asked to describe his playing style in 3 words. And he said brash, reckless, out of control, which made me laugh, because anyone watching knows there's serious technical quality there. So he was doing himself a slight disservice. But what stood out was how quickly he moved away from talking about himself technically and focused on the mentality side, getting teammates fired up, lifting the crowd, raising the atmosphere. That's what he values most. And we've seen it on the biggest international stages, the way he connects with fans, the way he energizes teammates. And it was genuinely brilliant to see that same presence in the English National League. And you could tell the impact that he had, not just on West Brom, but the league as a whole. Younger players, almost starstruck. That is how influential he is. And even the goal against Sevenoaks, it ultimately comes from a pretty horrific error and mistake that leaves the door open for him around the halfway line. But the celebration, straight to the crowd, kissing the fans, soaking it in, that connection with the supporters really does matter. He is good for the game. He is a role model in how he carries himself, how he competes, how he represents the sport. He is truly one of a kind.
I didn't want to make this the Zach Dickey segment because on commentary it was very difficult, and you ask many people, I've probably failed a fair bit to not just talk about Zach and his impact for the entirety of the 40 minutes of every game. I was so excited. Having seen him in Sydney, I knew what he was going to bring. His energy is electric. It's infectious. It just brings out the best in everyone. I sit and I watch and I commentate, and I couldn't help but do it with a smile on my face in every game. You know, the game against Greenbank, which, by the way, I completely forgot I commentated on until he referenced the Chris Gordon 180 that my face was just in shock and awe. But he won a free kick against Marcus. And I still laugh about it now because he just drove right up into his face, like, yeah, there we go, Marcus. It was just from letting him know that's 1-0 in the free kick category. He went to kicking. He is celebrating and hollering like he's just scored a goal. The celebration was just like, it's just so much joy in what he does. His mannerisms are so, for any wrestling fans out there, Ric Flair, just the woos. They are so Ric Flair-esque, it's unbelievable. And it just, like you say, it brings out the best in not only his teammates, but himself. He holds himself so professionally on the court for someone that is so out there with his energy and his mannerisms. And it made me, like, when we played West Brom, I tried to match him. I was like, you know what? I've not seen someone this weekend try and dish it out to you as good as you give it out. So there was one moment in particular, where the ball was ricocheted off the back of Tyler, we're in a wall, and I've played the ball off of him, off his front bumper, and is rolling out for a goal kick. I've said goal kick before it's even gone out of play. He then tries to claim it's a corner with the referee, and I've said, oh, kind of like, oh, go on, jog on, it's a goal kick, back up. And he literally, whilst reversing back towards his own goal, just locks eyes with, does not. We have a staring contest towards he. I'm saying, go back. And he says, Greg, I'm going to embarrass you in a minute. which just shows his character. Now, that minute never arrived. Just going to say that. It may well do in Game Week 5, who knows? But because of that, it's stuck in his head, because I know once he fired a ball off the back of my chair, went out for a corner, and all I heard was, "Uh-oh, Gregg. Uh-oh." He is just electric, but he has the quality. Like I say, the technique, it just kind of overshadows his technical ability. He's so good reading the play and his passing, his power is sensational. It really is. If you play it behind him and he connects with it, it's flying past you. And one thing that I think is he just overshadows, his mannerisms, his personality on the court. Don't let that distract you from how good he is as a player. I don't know if you noticed, Ryan, also, you can't unsee it once you see him. How small his chair looks compared to when you see him in his chair looks tiny.
Is this you saying you want him to come on the podcast in the coming weeks and months?
Couldn't possibly say, because everyone would be like, "Oh, it's a Zach Dickey fan club all over again."
I don't. I never shy away from being a huge fanboy for so many different players, but just on that point of contact, I think it's ingrained in all players across in the States that if you are to excel, you need to possess that power, that connection. We see their senior side built on that foundation, and he brought it over in game week 3. But just a more overarching assessment. We know West Brom are rebuilding, not just personnel-wise, but confidence-wise. And I genuinely think that their squad is good enough to be fighting at the top. The issue is they've dropped too many points this season to make a 25-26 title charge. But in the WFA Cup, I'm expecting them to be brave, as that probably registers their best opportunity to lift silverware. A slight elephant in the room is their squad size now. And we've spoken about the challenges of balancing minutes in ambitious squads many times on this podcast. A group of 7 or 8 all wanting to play every minute possible is difficult to manage. Introducing a player, an international player for that matter, like Zach, inevitably shifts minutes and dynamics. It raises standards, absolutely. That goes without saying, but it also restricts opportunities for others. So something to keep an eye on as the season enters its final 2 weekends. But the mentality never changes. West Brom believe they can beat anyone. The frustrating part is they probably can. They're competitive in every game. No one overwhelms them. No one dominates them. They just need to turn so close into clinical, because in this league, that's the gap between 5th and genuinely challenging at the top. Next up for them is their cup game against West Bromwich Albion Throstles. And then if we're assessing game week 4, it is a 4-fixture weekend. Leeds and Aspire on Saturday, tough. Middlesbrough and Muscle Warriors on Sunday, far more manageable. But overall, I think it's fair to say that the assessment is mostly positive. Now we move to Aspire in 4th. On 31 points, matched with Teesside and 1 behind Greenbank and Leeds on 32. Dare I say it, slightly underwhelming. They leave game week 3 with 2 wins and 2 draws, a 0-0 with Middlesbrough, a 1-0 win over Newcastle, a 6-0 win over GW3 Knights, and a 1-1 draw with Leeds. 8 points from 4 games, still unbeaten, and yet with Aspire, anything less than maximum point always feels slightly below expectation. Gregg, is that unfair, or is that just the standard that Aspire have now set over the last few years?
I think it's a standard they set themselves, and it's a standard they hold themselves to. So if it's a standard they hold themselves to, then we're well within our rights to hold them to it as well, because they're one of the most storied and historic teams we have in this country. They've been at the top for decades, and they still continue to come again. They will be disappointed, I think, with this weekend, especially not only with that 0-0 draw to Middlesbrough, which I haven't seen because I was playing on the other side, but just naturally they were disappointed to not have taken points against a side that are, yes, frustrating, but are towards the bottom of the table. Then a more clinical win over GW3 Knights after getting a 1-0 win against Newcastle. Well, again, tough to break down, but they would have wanted to score a couple more goals. All eyes were obviously coming into the weekend on that Aspire Leeds game, weren't they? The court was packed. Just a lot of people watching on the streams because it's just two big names. I've gone back and watched it because I had the pleasure of doing Newcastle versus Muscle Warriors on Court A. And it's a game they dominated, really. And I got that sense from the day because when you're on commentary, obviously out the corner of your eye, if all the action's on the bit that you can see, you know that team that's attacking that goal is dominating. So in the first half, all the action, I could see none of it really, because it all seemed to be at the other end of the court. And second half, it was the opposite. I could see most of the action because it was towards the end that Aspire were attacking. Having watched it back, by the way, 3 minutes in, the save from John Balding is ludicrous. I still don't know how he's managed to save it. The reaction time is ridiculously good. I know it's John Balding, and for me, he's the GOAT, but it still just baffles my brain how he saved that. They then had to deal with what they will feel is the controversy of their opener in the first half not being counted. They'll feel it was a fair goal. In my opinion, it is, but at the same time, the referee's got to make a split-second decision, and I don't envy them at all. So they've then got to get through that. They then take the lead, deservedly so, with a brilliant finish by Dan McClellan. It is so cute, the little flick off the front bumper into the far corner from the free kick. So cute to get past a really good defence. And then they just take their sort of proverbial foot off the gas and allow Leeds to have a moment of attacking that just costs them, having dominated for 30 minutes, to come away with a new point. They'll be bitterly disappointed.
Yeah, I was afforded the luxury of watching 3 of their 4 games. The only one I didn't call was their opener against Middlesbrough, which is never an ideal way to start a game week. We've already discussed how organised and defensively disciplined Middlesbrough are. Aspire had territory, they had control, but not enough incision. And that 0-0 almost set the tone, and perhaps a little frustration that carried over into the Newcastle fixture. Worth noting, John Balding failed the pre-match speed test against Newcastle, so couldn't feature in the first 20 minutes. That meant Dan McClellan moved centrally. We mostly see Dan performing that world-class wide role for Aspire in England, but when he plays centrally, he is unbelievable. His awareness, his timing, his manipulation of space, absolutely elite. They managed that first half brilliantly. And that's a fixture that has, in years gone by, exploded into chaos. So fiery, but Aspire were dominant, controlled, composed. And when John returned after passing the speed test in the second, they turned on the style. The combinations between John Balding, John Dixon, Dan McClellan were breathtaking. Even if it didn't result in goals, it showed how good the connection is between the 3 of them. I want to give a big shout out to John Dixon because I was more critical of him on the Game Week 2 recap, not because his levels were poor, but because over the last 12-18 months, he has elevated himself into the bracket of the absolute best wide players in the country. The Dylan Kelsells, the Marcus Harrisons, the Mitch Tinklers. That's the company he now keeps. So when his level dips to what many would consider solid, we notice. But it was in Game Week 3. He was bright. His pass accuracy was excellent. And the power he generates in distribution is something many young players should study. He's so good at connecting with the ball. It was in that one Charlie and I discussed John Balding's goal scoring on commentary, or perhaps lack of, in recent seasons, and how his deeper role allows Dan and John to thrive as focal points. But we also said that if Aspire are going to lift the trophy again, they'll probably need contributions from him. And almost immediately he delivered, scoring the winner against Newcastle. On the Leeds game, that's the one, to your point, everyone had circled. First versus second at the time, potentially season defining. Aspire controlled large spells, particularly in possession. They spent long periods camped in Leeds' half without truly testing Lewis Harris or Ethan Fisher often enough. It was territorial assertion, dominance, rather than necessarily all-out control. What stood out to me was Leeds' approach. It's probably the first time this season I've seen them show that level of respect to an opponent. They did not overcommit. They didn't throw players forward recklessly, as they have done in other fixtures. They wasn't naive. And Warren Kelso and Russ Rigby managed it intelligently, sitting deeper and mainly just protecting the central areas. But Aspire still dictated most of the play. Again, just to echo you, John's save is one of the best I've ever seen. And I've clipped it and I've posted it on social media, but that still doesn't quite do it justice, because you need to be in situ to understand the pace, the intensity, the power. His momentum, all of it was moving backwards. And I don't think anyone foresaw that ricochet off the front of Tom Kelly's chair, which redirected the ball towards the goal, destined for the goal. Somehow he adjusted, he thrusted forward and pushed the ball onto the post. And I can only imagine it's because of his slender frame and his world-class reactions that he was able to get there. I do not know another player in the world that makes that stop. Is that a fair statement? Because I've been racking my brains.
I think on pure footballing IQ and reaction time, no.
You're only referencing potentially the likes of Momo Galame in that situation.
Yeah, and which is why I suggested on pure footballing IQ and reaction time, no. Possibly we see the speed and the change of direction the French shares have, alongside Mohamed Bilami and Brown versus IQ and footballing ability, possibly. But I think on pure reaction time of football, I think John's the only one.
Yeah, I was really racking my brains, and to do none of the players in England any sort of disservice, John was the only one that I think could make it. I had a little think about Momo Galame, potentially Riley Johnson from the USA, but 99.9% of players fail to keep that from going over the goal line. So full credit to him, and he's getting the deserved credit from it. But from that point, I fully expected Leeds to grow in the game, but it was Aspire that continued to press. You've said it, John Dixon had the ball in the goal midway through the first half, disallowed by the officials for what they judged as an overly aggressive approach, I think. And from the commentary side, it looked like a perfectly good goal. But on commentary, we're courtside on the far side and don't quite have the same angle as officials. But it's one of those calls that's always going to split opinion. Then Dan McClellan's goal late in the second, it did stand. It was exceptional. The intentional spin and redirection on a ball that is coming straight into the front of your bumper, to quote Charlie McClellan, was genius. Gregg, the elephant in the room is you scored a very similar goal against Muscle Warriors, almost identical. It's not instinct, it's design. What were you thinking? We'll talk about your 4 goals against Muscle Warriors and that particular finish in a little bit more detail, but talk me through the thought process and the intent around a set piece like that. Is it something you discuss? Is it something that's by design, maybe a little bit of luck?
Yeah, I'm still pretty pleased with mine. And then Dan had to go and one up me, didn't he? Because the thing with Dan's is, you're right. I've watched it back. He's facing dead onto John. So for mine, had already turned my chair, and you were just going to flick it with the side of my chair. Dan is facing John with a front bumper, and then somehow manages to manipulate the ball and have time to turn and put it in the far corner. So Dan is a really good fish. I just wish you'd saved it for a different weekend, if I'm honest. It is something we've discussed. We've done it in training a couple of times. I've seen players do it before. I've seen Ed Common do it numerous times. Even though I'd somehow forgot he'd scored 50 goals for Teesside. It's something I try to emulate. It's a skill I try to add to my bow. You're just looking for, it has to be just deft. You need that little bit of chair control just to get the timing, the angle, and the pace right to almost curl it. It doesn't look like it curls, but it feels like it curls. So yeah, it's an unbelievable finish from Dan because, like I said, he has to face front on and still manipulate the ball. It's brilliant.
Not just that, the context, as you've already said, beating one of the best defensive players in the country in Ethan Fisher. But that put them 1-0 up, and it looked at that point they was gonna cruise to 3 points. But late on, Aspire just switched off for a moment. They had dominated territory all game, but Leeds found space in Aspire's half. And with players of that quality, one opportunity can be enough. Ethan Fisher finished superbly from outside the box. From our angle, it almost felt like play completely paused and he just simply slotted home. It was a really good strike, though perhaps one Aspire will feel they could have defended better. The thing is, if you had offered Aspire a point before kickoff, they may have reluctantly taken it. At full time, they will feel like they left 2 behind. There's no question about that. We have to talk about the officials. I think Paul Yates in the centre was excellent in my view. This was a hugely physical game, a lot of contact, plenty of metal on metal, and he allowed it to flow without losing control. It's not an easy fixture to manage. Every decision is magnified. And although Leeds' equaliser has since been debated online with suggestions of a possible 2-on-1 in the build-up, overall I thought the officiating team, including Steve Crump and Ian Harley, handled it really well. As I mentioned at the top, there were 14 yellow cards issued in Gameweek 3, which equals a record for National League weekends. Now, just quickly, ahead of the round of fixtures, clubs had been informed that referees would be taking a much firmer stance, particularly around dissent. The positive is none of those 14 cautions were for dissent, which suggests that players and coaches on the whole responded to that messaging, which is exactly what you want to see. However, there was one moment late in the Leeds game that probably could have been handled better by John Balding, who reacted towards the official not in a great way, and under the guidance given before the weekend, that could have very easily resulted in further punishment. And it's not about singling anyone out, and emotions run high in fixtures of that magnitude. But when there's a clear directive around conduct, especially regarding dissent, players, particularly senior figures, they need to be mindful of that. Because overall, I thought the officiating team managed a very physical game, high-intensity game well. But moments like that are reminders that standards have to remain consistent as the league continues to evolve. And I only say that because Spire and John Balding, more than anyone, set those elite standards, both on and off the court. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a moment I've rarely seen from John Balding when the ball is at least in play. He just completely was unaware to the fact the ball would have made it play and was just sat there arguing with Steve Crump as the game went on without around him. I mean, Dan McLean was screaming at him, going, "John, play on." Like Dan Rigby was bringing the ball up the court.
As we were on the commentary gantry as well. I couldn't quite understand why he had turned all of his attention away from the action to contest the decision.
He eventually got the decision, but you play to the whistle. I've rarely seen that. I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, this is what it looked like on the stream watching it back. Did Paul Yates have a word with, because I think Lewis Harris came over to suggest that was dissent by John Balding and that he should be yellow carded. And I think Paul Yates had a word with him, went, if you do that, that's dissent as well. Doesn't look like on the street.
it's hard to pick up. You'll know when you've got the commentary headsets on, you're talking to one another, you can't necessarily hear what people are saying, and it all happened so fast and our attention was drawn straight towards John, which was right in front of us. I can't quite work out what the initial opposal was, but it was just one of those moments that just boiled over. It happens in elite sport. You don't necessarily want to take that passion out of the game. Sorry, correction. You definitely don't want to take that passion out of the game. It's just about controlling it. And the respect for officials is paramount, especially as the WFA are now running sort of a campaign that prioritizes that respect. And the messaging is very clear prior to game weeks. But John will be the first to hold his hand up and apologise, and as I'm sure he did after the games. It's just when you're locked in, when you're desperate of winning a fixture, sometimes emotions can get the better of you. But overall, it was 2 wins, 2 draws, not disastrous in any way, but it's also not enough to ensure the title race remains fully in their hands. They're still unbeaten, but for the first time in a while, the margin for error feels razor thin, and that's what makes this season so fascinating.
Doesn't it just show the level this year that a team that were top after the second game week, coming into game week 3, who went unbeaten, had 2 wins and 2 draws, then fall to 4th by the end of the third game week? Bonkers.
It is bonkers. Game week 4 of the Premiership sees them open against GBG Knights before that famous fixture against West Bromwich Albion. And on Sunday, they play Muscle Warriors and West Bromwich Albion Throttles. They'll be looking at that as an opportunity to get maximum points. The West Bromwich Albion game always closely contested, but the others very, very winnable. We now move to 3rd in the standings, and Teesside, who I did mention at the top, just quietly went about their business in game week 3 because so much of the spotlight was on Aspire, was on Leeds. Greenbank at its conclusion were the talk of the town, but while everyone else grabbed the headlines, Teesside delivered a faultless weekend. 4 games, 4 wins, 9-0 against Muscle Warriors, 2-0 against Middlesbrough, 2-0 against West Bromwich Albion, and 2-0 against Sevenoaks. 15 goals scored, none conceded. Gregg, from inside the camp, did that feel as controlled as it looked from the outside? And then just give me your assessments from game week 3.
Yeah, back to my Teesside segment with journalist integrity. Yeah, it just seemed like a weekend where we went about our business, possibly not grabbing headlines or, still perhaps finding another level. But I think that's more to the impact of the opposition rather than us ourselves. Sevenoaks and Middlesbrough in particular, frustrating the breakdown when there's so many players behind the ball. Any team's going to struggle to break them down. You saw Aspire do that with Middlesbrough in the opening game on the Saturday. So to come out of it with 4 wins, no goals conceded, we're just quietly going about our business and letting other teams take the spotlight, because now we're sat in a great position, 1 point off Leeds and Greenbank, level on points with Aspire, but crucially we have, a game in hand on Aspire and Leeds and 2 in hand on Greenbank. And we know that game week 4 on paper is relatively easier, but we know that game week 5, oh boy, very spicy, very spicy.
Here's where I'm going to be slightly greedy, because sometimes watching Teesside, I find myself a little frustrated. And that may be incredibly unfair, because these are elite players, reigning champions, some of the best in the world. But occasionally, I feel like you're operating at about 50%. And I know that sounds ridiculous when you've just won 4 from 4 without conceding, but that's the standard you've set. That you're the benchmark, you're the champions, the side everyone measures themselves against. And I'm not saying you should adopt a 4-out system like some others. That's not necessarily your identity. But the difference I saw, and again, I wasn't afforded the benefit of watching all of your games, but in the ones I did, it's clear that when you were brought into a more advanced role with Ed kind of as a sweeper keeper, Tyler in the centre, Mitch out wide, it was electric. And I just want to see Ed in that role, advancing further forward to support attacks, not permanently, but selectively, because it changes the dynamic. It stretches teams. It creates overloads. And we saw you have some difficulty, relative difficulty, I must emphasise, against Middlesbrough, against West Brom, against Sevenoaks, because a 2-0 scoreline for you is below par. Again, that's what you've set. And I just think you can create those overloads and be a little bit more unpredictable. And it's maybe just me wanting a bit more spectacle because I'm greedy. But I will absolutely not question Owen Swift or Paul Pearson. They defied the odds last season, lifted the trophy through that pragmatism, through quality, through control. Teesside scored 80 goals last season, roughly 17 per weekend on average. This season, they've got 39 goals across 3 weekends, so around 13 on average. Still strong, still efficient, but slightly lower output. Tyler Reeve, sensational. We've spoken about him many times. Is he the strongest player in the dribble in the country? I throw to you. This is where we go with your journalistic integrity and not your Teesside affiliations.
Yes, and it doesn't give away many fouls, because I'd say your brain goes to like Ethan Fisher, but Ethan can give away the free kick, in my opinion. All about players I've come up against in the dribble. Marcus Harrison, up there. Marcus is the one that you probably say the benchmark with.
Let me clarify. There's dribblers, there's technical dribblers that can get, and then there's strong dribblers, the ones you cannot get off the ball. And I think Tyler is in a bracket above that still.
So, training Monday night after the weekend, we just did games, and every time, by the time the 3 or 4 times, I got on the wing and then was met by Tyler. I was like, Ed, get ready, because he's going to go past me in 3, 2, 1. And every time he did, he is so strong. It's ridiculous. I think I get the luxury in games where I sit in goal of a lot of the times, with the respect as who we play because they're so defensive, I could have just sat and watched. I had the luxury of being half a spectator at times. So in the Sevenoaks game, my first touch didn't come until 18.5 minutes in. Middlesbrough, I think I touched it once in the second half, which everyone made a big laugh and joke about. It was quite fun. The Muscle Warriors first half, I think I touched it twice. So I get the luxury of being able to see the team play. And he just is so good, because he had that one against Muscle Warriors because he scored within about 20 seconds. That, I mean, if I'm putting my integrity aside and put my Teesside hat on for a second, I think it should have stood. But it doesn't distract from the fact that he is just so good on the ball, passing it as well. And I think, with the 3 players, outfield players who start every game, we have, Mitch Tinkler, Ed Common, Tyler Reeve. That's the strongest 3 as you're ever going to see. What we can create is just breathtaking at times. Mitch is a player that is so clinical a lot of the time. He'll bury it in the corner. He tees up Ed very well. Ed just is, what can you say about Ed Common? I mean, that hasn't already been said. He's a magician, and I think I was just delighted to get in on the act against Muscle Warriors, to be honest. It was quite nice.
We'll get to that in just a second, but I just want to go back to Tyler, because to my question, I would argue, yes, he is the strongest dribbler in the country. I genuinely don't see anyone consistently breaking pressure like he does. He has so much balance, control, composure. If anyone wants to counter it, by all means do. But right now, he's operating at a different level physically. To your point, I was gutted for him because in your game versus Muscle Warriors, you said in the first 20 seconds, I think it was the first 10 seconds, he had the ball in the net. The quickest goal I've ever seen, but it was disallowed. That is one of the decisions I have to disagree with the officials on. I thought it was perfectly acceptable battle, which Tyler won and then guided it over the line. It certainly didn't affect the outcome or Tyler's impact, but it would have been a nice accolade for him to have. Then on Ed Common, again, I feel like I'm a bit negative, and it might sound a little bit unfair, but there isn't a huge amount to note from him from this weekend, and that's not because he wasn't excellent. It's because his baseline level is world class, and with Ed, the extraordinary has almost become ordinary. So the level he operates in, week out, is so high that unless he does something genuinely breathtaking, it barely registers as a headline moment anymore. And that is in no way a criticism, far from it. It's simply the standard he set. He's created this almost impossible bar for excellence where controlled dominance and technical perfection are just expected, which is not a great place to be in because you're always under a magnifying glass, but it tells you everything about the level he's competing at. And we'll have to go on to you. 4 goals against Muscle Warriors. I said how magical it was to watch and commentate on. You told me after you hit flow state, and for anyone that's watched F1, the Brad Pitt movie last year, will know what that is referencing. Was that the best 20-minute spell you've ever had in the National League? Because from commentary, I was lost for words. The timing, the movement, the finishing, everything was just on a different level.
Please carry on waxing lyrically about our performance. I can't really describe it, to be honest. It was, everything seemed to click. And you know me, I'm my own worst critic when it comes to how I play. And I will focus on the one negative and the 9 out of the 9 positives if I do 9 things well. And obviously my first touch was a mishit 180. So I thought, I need to carry on. But since from then on, everything seemed to work. Everything I touched just came off. It was probably, like I said, the best 15-20 minute spell I've had in a long while. To credit Jeff, the ref, stats wise, the last time I scored 4 in a game was nearly 10 years to the day. It was March 2016, also against Muscle Warriors. There's a little bit of poetry there, so apologies to Muscle Warriors for that one. I loved it. I can't just cut, like, I did feel a bit of I was a bit of a confidence boost and a bit of I strutted my stuff a little bit, which I don't often get to do. It was quite nice. And then to counter that, to bookend the weekend, I had to show my goalkeeping ability in West Brom because there was a few chances West Brom had where saves had to be made.
Is this you putting yourself in the bracket of the cloned player debate, that you're versatile and can operate in any of the 4 positions?
Not to the. I've always said I'm not a 9 or 10 out of 10 in one position, but I can give you a 7 out of 10 in every position. I don't think I'd like to be in the conversation, but like I'd be further down on the list than the likes of Dave Lewis and Ed Common. But yeah, I'm versatile enough.
I think I'm going to put somewhat of a social post out that draws people answers out and something we could potentially have a future episode on. But just back to Teesside, that version of Teesside, when you play with that freedom, it's terrifying for the rest of the division. And as we've already mentioned, you're in the driving seat, the title is in your hands. Game week 4, relative to game week 5, incredibly kind. You play GBG Knights, Seven Oaks, Muscle Warriors, Villa Rockets and Throssels. Also worth noting quickly, you conclude the season with 2 5-fixture weekends, which is incredibly demanding and the exact same as Teesside still in the Championship. So no time to rest. You're playing the first game and the last game on the Saturday. You've got obviously busy games on the Sunday as well. So not easy because game week 5 has you starting against Aspire before playing West Brom, Newcastle, Greenbank, and ending with Leeds. It's almost certainly going to be concluded in game week 5, maybe even the very last game, because you referenced before we started recording Teesside versus Leeds at 12:45 on the 19th of April on Court B. On Court A at the very same time, Spire versus Greenbank. So good luck, everyone, dividing your attention across those two.
Yeah, get 2 screens up, I would say, because you're not going to want to miss a minute of either game. Yeah, it's having to have 2 5-game weekends at the end of the season. It is what it is. You have to play them at some point, don't you? So we'll take it in our stride. But we've got, you look at our squad, we've got almost, if you look at it, sort of England past and present in a common, England present and future in Tyler Reeve, and England future in Mitch Tinkler, because he will definitely play for England one day. I will be gobsmacked if he doesn't, because he can go right to the very top. So, yeah, that's me done to Teesside Torn. Shall we move on to second place?
Absolutely. And in second place, we've got Greenbank level with first on 32 points. What a statement weekend this was for Greenbank. 5 wins from 5, maximum 15 points, different types of victories, different quality of opposition, but the same outcome every time. They beat Muscle Warriors 4-0. They dismantled GBG Knights 6-0, secured a tight 1-0 over West Bromwich Albion Throssels, edged West Bromwich Albion 1-0, and then finished with a dramatic late 2-1 win over Newcastle United Foundation. Comfortable when needed, but also clinical when required. Greg, when you look at that set of results, what stands out most about Greenbank right now? And importantly, are they a genuine title contender? Can they maintain that across 5 weekends? We know they've played a game more than the team above them and aspiring fourth, and 2 more than you. Is that what's going to hurt them? Dropped points in game weeks 2.
Yeah, and still, if you ask Marcus Harrison, that last game, Sunday in game week 2, that where they dropped points to Throssels and losing that game, my word, he still is hurt about that one, because he knows if they have that game back, they're top of the table on their own merit, and the games in hand don't seem as important. This was the weekend that Greenbank really put themselves on the map and say, we're here not to challenge for 4th and 3rd, we're here to challenge for that title. And they had to do it battling some challenges they faced across the weekend. They didn't have a registered coach because Jerry was unavailable. Marcus Harrison failed speed test in the first game against Muscle Warriors, so I had to not play the first half. And that he got suspended for a yellow card right at the end of the West Brom game, which I missed, by the way, and didn't know about it until afterwards on commentary, which meant he was suspended for their game against Newcastle. I think for me, that Newcastle game especially showed just the quality they have without Marcus Harrison playing, because Marcus Harrison obviously takes the headlines when you look at the squad. He is the first name you look to and go, wow, that is quality. They took him out. Obviously, we know about Torbjørn Krab. He's excellent for Denmark. He's got that defensive resolve, able to dribble. He can play some brilliant passes. But, and I know you're going to say this as well, Jacob Buck-Platt this weekend, my word, rightfully standout player of the weekend. And he just, for someone so young, showed composure, just confidence, ability, bags of it, whether it be defensively, whether it be in the dribble, but his passing was absolutely sensational. It really made everyone sit up and go, yeah, this is a kid to watch for the future. Without a doubt. Another one that you said, he keeps it up. We're playing for England one day. The free kick goal they scored against West Brom was ingenious on the spot. Marcus Harrison had Luke Kelly at the far post. And Jacob kept saying, look, just play it to me and I'll 180 it. I'll 180 it, I'll 180 it. Marcus went, just reverse now, reverse. And played the ball with so much power across the box. Chris Gordon and Zach D couldn't get there. They have definitely thrust themselves into conversation right up there coming into the season and they're a team you don't want to play because defensively they're so hard to break down. But unlike the Middlesbroughs, the Sevenoaks, and the GBG Knights we talked about earlier, they have the ability going forward to punish you consistently.
Yeah, for me, this weekend was about intent, bravery, because to expand on game week 2, I called, I think, all of their games. I was slightly underwhelmed, not because they were poor, but because this squad has title credentials. They've always had title credentials since they brought Marcus Harrison in. And I didn't feel they attacked certain games with enough authority. This weekend, completely different. They played like a team that wanted to win the Premiership, and that is the big distinction and the big difference. Jerry Kinsella was absent, meaning full coaching responsibility fell to Marcus Harrison. And because of the requirement for a separate designated coach on the sideline, Marcus was unable to play in their opening fixture. And to your point, he then received a yellow card against his former side, West Bromwich Albion, resulting in a suspension. So he missed 2 of the 5 games. So credit to Dave Harrison for stepping in and supporting from the sideline, because that stability, I think, really helped. Focusing on some of the players, Torbjorn Klarup, we've praised Toby for years. We saw him in 2023 at the World Cup. We saw the quality. It was obvious then. Since joining Greenbank and following his performances in the for Nations Cup, where he helped Denmark secure qualification for this year's World Cup, he's come into this season with serious expectation. He can no longer afford to be a passenger because people are very much aware of his quality. He's delivering. His 3 goals against GBG Knights made him only the 2nd overseas player ever to score a Premiership hat-trick. Quick fire, who's the other?
Valentino Zagarelli.
Valentino Zagarelli got 3 in his short stint with West Bromwich Albion. But it's not just the goals. When Greenbank have found themselves without Marcus in the past, they've just looked a little bit toothless, which is understandable. Marcus is one of the most influential players this country has ever produced. Toby gives them something close to like a Danish version of that. He's powerful in the dribble, horrible to play against, completely comfortable playing the stubborn, territorial football, but equally capable of being expansive and fluid when the system opens up. He doesn't hide. He embraces the responsibility. Excellent weekend. Very much deserved of his position in the fantasy team of the weekend. Then there's Jacob Buchplaat. This was one of the most impressive individual game weeks I've seen in quite some time. The versatility is outrageous. Most often in the goalkeeper shirt, but within Greenbank's fluid system, he occupies all 4 positions across different parts of the game. He takes penalties, which shows the trust Marcus has in him. He dictates rhythm. He absorbs pressure. And I said last season during the Premiership predictions episode that if he continued developing under Marcus Harrison, we could be talking about someone who's fast-tracked through the England system. And my prediction of him featuring in England's Argentina squad for 2026 was slightly ambitious, granted. But what we're watching now is a player who has transitioned from excelling in the Championship to being a steady performer in the Premiership to now being a genuine leading force within that squad. And I'm so happy for him because I've watched him for many years now, had him on the talent pathway. He was fast-tracked through the RATP into the NETP, and you're probably seeing why. Gregg, you're actually a similar profile, I'd say, to Jacob. Versatile, adaptable, comfortable anywhere, being that defensive and that wide player. Do you think that level of versatility helps progression, or does it sometimes hinder players like yourselves because coaches can't quite define your best position? Because I still don't know where Jacob's optimal international role would be. Would he be the sweeper keeper like Chris? Would he be the wide operator like Marcus, the creator like John? And that dilemma applies to so many players. Just interested to get your thoughts on it, because he wouldn't be afforded that same freedom in an England shirt.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? For me, I think he's best in an England shirt as a sweeper, second pivot keeper, pushing, but with obviously the ability to play in that creative role when the pivot swap over. I've always viewed it as a positive to have the ability to play in any position. I think the benefit that Jacob has is he's still so young, and so he can prioritize one position if he wants to, whilst not losing the ability to play in the other positions, because some skills are transferable. And it's just knowing, okay, identifying where do I see myself excelling most? Where are the gaps that are going to appear in the senior squad over the next coming years? Because he's definitely one to watch in that regard. And it's just being able to focus on that and hone his craft, use that experience over the next coming seasons of what you think is going to be a consistent title challenge from Greenbank if they keep the team together for the next couple of years. Learning from Marcus Harrison, getting fast track through the English system, to then say, look, 2028, 29, looking at someone who could be a star or key member of a England senior side. So having versatility is great. I love it. Being able to play in any position, because I could fill a hole in any squad. But it also can be a headache for coaches, because trying to work out where they best fit, where they do a good job everywhere, can be a challenge.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's no right or wrong answers. Versatility certainly helps players, but they need to make sure that they are completely proficient at one role and are constantly assessing the situation above them in the England pathway. You'll be doing the exact same thing, as will the likes of Dan Rigby and others. Do you know what impressed me most about this weekend for Greenbank? I think it's the first time since they were promoted from the Championship where they have excelled without being solely reliant on Marcus Harrison. He played a secondary role in the success. We saw Toby and Jacob really take the reins, and that's not to say Marcus didn't have an impact. He absolutely did in those 3 games in the middle of their game week 3. But that reliance has hurt them before. Last season, I think he missed game week 2 or 3 when he broke his foot, and we saw their season derail. That wasn't the case in game week 3 of the 25-26 season. And also Eddie Curran deserves credit as well. There's an added responsibility on her now, particularly with squad changes this season, with Liam Fitzpatrick rejoining Manchester United, and she chipped in with important energy and goals. So really good contribution from her. If we focus on that Newcastle win, no panic after Newcastle's equaliser on 32 minutes, just calm, composed. And then we saw the bravery of Jacob advancing up the court to score in the 34th minute. That's potential champions, especially in a weekend where both Leeds and Aspire dropped points. Greenbank didn't blink and then put themselves right in that conversation, that picture. I need to just focus on the 14th of December, which was the Sunday in game week 2, because outside of it, their record reads as played 11, won 10, drawn 1, scored 25, conceded 2. On that day, they lost 2 of their 3 matches and drew the other. And they conceded twice as many goals in that particular day as they have of the rest of the season combined. So you can understand why Marcus is going back, regretting the actions. But how many times have we seen that in title races, irrelevant of what sport, irrelevant of what level? You need to be consistent from the first minute on game week 1 and to the last minute on game week 5 if you're to beat the odds. And so many times have we seen people say, oh, in hindsight, we could have done that differently. We should have done that differently. If we got a point there, if we scored that goal there. That is the reality of a title race. The small margins or switching off for a day can be detrimental to a campaign. But that tells you everything about their level now, and they're still absolutely in this title race. Game week 4 will be played just after their huge cup game, it must be said, against Leeds. But game week 4 particularly, Sevenoaks, Newcastle, Leeds and Villa. So Sevenoaks is one they'll expect to manage. Newcastle again will be physical. Leeds is enormous, potentially season shaping, and Villa are riding momentum. So if they navigate that game week 4 well, particularly against Leeds, we're not just talking about contenders, we're talking about potential title favourites depending on results elsewhere. And that brings us very nicely onto the team top of the table, Leeds, who were phenomenal in game week 3. Across all 4 fixtures, they settled into that now familiar structure. Ethan Fisher wearing the goalkeeper shirt, Lewis Harris operating centrally with that constant rotation as to who holds the primary pivot in the centre, and then Dylan Kelsall and Dan Rigby on either wing. And some of the football they are producing right now is simply sensational. It's some of the best Powerchair football I have ever seen, and I've been incredibly fortunate to watch the sport at the highest level, both domestically and internationally. The power, the precision, the purpose in everything they do, it's world class, and there's literally no other way to frame it. The results back it up. 5-0 win over GWG Knights, 3-0 win over Middlesbrough, 4-0 win over Villa Rockets, and a 1-1 draw with Aspire in what was at the time first versus second. 10 points from a possible 12 goals scored, just 1 conceded. Greg, from your perspective, having faced them in game week 2, watched them closely, is this version of Leeds the most complete attacking side in Premiership history? And then give me your assessments.
Oh, that's a loaded question, isn't it? I'm a bit gutted I didn't get to see any of Leeds this weekend, to be honest. Didn't call any of their games. I've obviously watched back their game against Aspire, and I saw a couple of moments, highlights, especially their second goal against Middlesbrough that you've shown me, that you can't stop waxing lyrically off. The dummy from Dylan Kelsall is stupendously good. So very, very good. We knew that this is the potential they had when they made the signings this summer. They put together this sort of super squad of young English talent. This is what they could do. There were question marks after the game week 1 of whether they were going to gel. Boy, have they gelled. I think it's certainly up there with one of the best attacking teams we've seen. You could certainly make a case for them being the most, because when they, like, the passing ability of all 4 players in a 4-out system is a joke. If I was putting my T-side hat on, I'd say us last year, we'd give them a good go. As an attacking outlet, you said they're scoring 80 goals. But journalistic integrity-wise, I obviously know that I would say that this, as an all 4-player system, which is what we weren't last year, as an all 4 attacking player system, is probably the best we've seen in the country in this league, and would give the majority of international teams an incredible run for their money.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that distinction, because it's the 4-out approach, it's the bravery to commit 4 players forward, which is why I asked the question. And to my knowledge, the only one that could potentially match that in terms of excitement and attacking intent was West Brom in 23-24, when they had Chris, Marcus, Valentino and Dylan. But what stands out to me most isn't the volume of goals, it's the technical level they're playing at. The GWG game was one where they turned on the style. No players, which I'm sure you will attest, really like the first game of a game week, because you're navigating travel, you're coming over from hotels, some are traveling distances. You just, especially the long break that we've observed between game weeks 2 and 3 as well. You need to hit the ground running, and they did exactly that. The movement, the speed of circulation, the trust in the rotations, it stretches teams mentally before it stretches them physically. If we focus on some of the players, Dylan Kelsall. We had a debate over the weekend about who the best controller of the ball is in the country. I think you said Ed Common, others said Dan McClellan, but right now for me it's Dylan. I've never seen a player so consistently manipulate the pace of a ball to his advantage, particularly when receiving it in reverse. He has this unbelievable ability to take just enough pace off the ball to bring it under his control while still keeping it travelling faster than a defender can recover. So the ball is often moving 10 plus kilometers an hour, but not so fast that he can't execute his intentions, whether that's a 180, whether that's a control, whether that's an acceleration down the wings. It's remarkable. I'm going to clip it up and post it today after we release this podcast. So depending on when you're listening to this episode, you'll be able to see Dylan's goal on social media against Middlesbrough. One of the best finishes I've ever seen. James found, as we spoke about when we were talking about Middlesbrough, is one of the most dependable defenders in the division. And yet, Dylan completely deceived him. The disguise, the execution, the composure, it was on another level. And credit to him. If we focus on the Aspire game from a Leeds perspective, as already mentioned, the first time this season, I think Leeds have shown restraint, but sensible restraint. They didn't overcommit. They didn't throw players forward recklessly. They were controlled. They were disciplined. They did allow Aspire to have spells of possession, but they stayed compact and they trusted their structure. And then when that moment arrived late on, they took it. And it was the maturity that impressed me as much as the attacking brilliance we've seen across their other games in the weekend. Dan Rigby, excellent, continues to dictate tempo superbly. Ethan Fisher's judgment, when to hold, when to advance, has come on massively. A slight change from his time with Newcastle, where he was kind of the main player. Lewis Harris remains one of the best operators in the middle. And collectively, they look aligned. They're singing off the same song sheet. They're confident. And in an attacking sense, they look incredibly difficult to contain. The question is sustainability. Can they maintain this level across the full campaign? Again, testing your integrity. Who is the favourite for the title?
I've said all along, Lee, I said it in the Gameweek 2 recap, Leeds are my favourites. I still make Leeds my favourites. And I don't think that'll possibly go down well with my Teesside teammates. Although I know they respect, obviously, Leeds immensely, because obviously at the moment we're only 1 point off with the game in hand. For me, I'm always I'm not an optimist, I'm more of a cautious realist. For me, they are, like you said, they are the best attacking quartet when they play as a quartet, and stopping them takes a lot of effort. So for me, Leeds are still title favourites. I never like to be in the position of making yourself title favourites. I think that's being a bit presumptive and disrespectful. So yeah, Leeds for me are my team that will go on to win the title.
I mean, it would be hard to disagree with that. Also, I want to talk about Dan Rigby, because I think it's fair to say he's the one really knocking on the England door, probably next in line. I think it's fair to say he is versatile, a strong presence around the squad. I think his PF1 classification adds real value at international level, and that balance matters within our sport. He gives you that flexibility. The numbers underline it as well. 13 goals already this season, 5 more than he managed across the whole of last year, putting him third in the scoring charts, and 11 assists, just one behind Tyler Reeve at the top of that list. So you're looking at elite numbers there. And I said in the podcast prediction for this season, I thought Dan would be right up there as top goal scorer because of the additions of Dylan Kelsall and Ethan Fisher, allowing him to drift slightly wider, more advanced. And that's exactly what's happening. He's arriving later. He's striking the ball so cleanly. He's playing with confidence. And importantly, he's already been around the England setup. He's been at senior level before. Currently, he's next in line, and he covers absences if and when there are them within Adam McAvoy's squad. So he's right up there, and I just want to see him really push on now, and maybe beyond 2026 be a real player for England. But there's no reason why he can't force himself into that narrative for Argentina, don't you think? It needs the players around him to maintain their levels. If any of them dip, he's straight in there.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's next in line for me. Already fills in gaps when there's absences in the senior squad. You're right, the PF1 classification does add some weight. Just makes it easier. His ability is just incredible, whether it be out wide or in that first pivot sort of position. He can play sort of everywhere. And yeah, he can really knock on the door for Argentina. And it does require everyone else in the squad to maintain their levels, which I think is what is a good thing about the development squad, and how we viewed it for Italy was, if we're not going, we at least know that the 8 that is going to Italy will be the best 8, and they will have been pushed to the maximum to earn their spot there. And I think that'll be the same in Argentina in October.
Not one of the current England senior squad has dropped their levels. They're fighting at different stages in the table, but all of them, I think, know what's at stake. And on one of those players, Ethan Fisher scored his 50th league goal in their 5-0 win over GBG Knights. He becomes the 78th player to reach that mark. Just quickly, when we're talking about England, we're talking about players. Do you know what really excites me is an England team comprised of Ethan, Tyler, Dan McClellan, Dylan Kelsall. Tell me that is not the most ridiculous team that England can field.
Yeah, you're certainly not wrong, and we're certainly not trying to push out John Balding or Chris Gordon into the old.
No, it doesn't include any of the core 4 that we've come to expect over the last 2-3 competitions. It doesn't have Chris, it doesn't have John, it doesn't have Ed, it doesn't have Marcus. They will still hopefully play for the foreseeable future and contribute at international level. But to know there is the potential another core 4 forming for the next 10-15 years excites me so much. And you can include players like that in it: Jacob Bookplatt, Dan Rigby, even Dan. There's so many. It's so exciting.
Oh yeah, the talent pool is just incredible, because we've not mentioned Lewis Harris in any of the as you've gone forward, pushing it forward. He's still in and around that sort of level where, with Leeds pushing at the top of the table, he's right in that conversation as well. I'm already said Mitch Tinker will play for England one day. So I'd throw him into the ring in that list of, you can name an 8-player squad there that can dominate for the next 10 to 15 years, fingers crossed. So we're all just trying to play our part in forming what is ultimately the best squad for England. And that's all that we really care about, is making sure that whatever 8 goes to a major tournament for England is the major 8 is the best 8 that we can provide. And they're going at the peak of their form, knowing they've been tested to the max of their ability, and they've had to put 110% effort into earn that spot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what's important to me the most is the fact that you're all pushing each other every National League weekend, competing directly against one another, raising the standards, and it will only accelerate the development. And for England, that's a very healthy place to be. Game week 4 for Leeds comprises of Muscle Warriors, West Bromwich Albion, Greenbank, and Sevenoaks. So it's the 2 in the middle. We will probably be micro-analysing and very excited to watch, because they're the ones that will define their season. But overall, it's a congratulations to them. They topped the table for the very first time. And we're excited to see what they do in game weeks 4 and 5. And that just about wraps up episode 48 of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast and our game week 3 recap. A weekend where the top 3 shifted, where the intensity hit new levels, and where the margins at both ends of the table became even tighter. Game week 4 of the Premiership is scheduled for March 28th and 29th. So mark your calendars. A huge thank you, as always, to MK Battery for powering this podcast. Thanks as well to Slater and Gordon for their continued support of the National League, and to Swizzles for celebrating the standout moments and players across every game week. Thank you to all our listeners. And finally, thank you to my new co-host, Gregg Baxter.
Thank you, Ryan.